let's get to it. What did we say the fundamental economic problem is? Scarcity, right? This is a recap. Fundamental economic problem, scarcity. Now, I want us to explain this finite resources. Finite resources. When we talk of resources in economics, right? Resources, we are talking about what? When we speak of resources, especially in economics, when we speak of resources, what are we talking about? I'll just make a note. These are
Gold and diamonds.
in fact, they are known as
Factors of production.
thank you. Excuse my handwriting, eh? We so much used to typing, it becomes difficult to write, ne? Factors of production. So I want you to master this, and you will be set for life. When we speak of resources in economics, we want to refer to them as factors of production. Factors of production. So the limited nature of these factors of production means that societies cannot produce everything they want. Right? What are these factors of production? What are these factors of production? They are divided into two. They are divided into two. There is primary factors
Secondary.
and
Secondary.
secondary. Yes. Right. What do we have under primary factors of production?
Natural
resources
and
and labor.
Yeah.
Right. So land, sometimes to land and minerals or natural resources. Land and minerals. Land and minerals or natural resources. That's your primary factor. Your labor, this is the human effort that is required to convert these natural resources into something useful, right? Your labor, the human effort that you produce. Now, under secondary, we've got what?
Capital and entrepreneurship.
Capital and enterprise or entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship. Right. Let's break down these two. So if you check, we have jumped over to another page in your module guide, which is not in the beginning pages. I think it's in unit 2. So what we're explaining now, you will find it in unit 2 for those who want to refer to what we are talking about. Right. So we're still talking about the fundamental economic problem of scarcity, and we're defining what is scarce. And in economics, we refer to these as factors of production, which are classified into two: your primary and your secondary factors of production. Under your primary, you've got land, or your natural resources, or land and minerals, and your labor, which is the human effort, right? On your secondary factors of production, we then have what is known as our capital and entrepreneurship. Now, let's break it down. When we talk of capital, we are referring to resources that are used to produce other goods and services, to produce goods and services. So we are not talking about money. Please understand me. When we talk in economics, when we talk of capital, we are speaking of machinery.
Yes.
Machinery. These are resources that are used to produce goods and services, right? Entrepreneurship, this is the knowledge or the expertise that brings all these other factors together, your entrepreneurship. And it is a factor of production, entrepreneurship, right? Capital, machinery. Yes, Andres, there's a question.
Sorry, sir. I've never done business subjects in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Maybe I'm just a little bit lost, but under the factors of production, you need money to have machinery. You need knowledge to have enterprise and entrepreneurship. Why are is entrepreneurship then covered under finite resources?
There's a limit to how much knowledge is there, or there's a limit to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not unlimited, right? So we're saying in a particular sector, the amount of people who are willing to engage or to combine these other factors of production to a meaningful product, they are limited, right? They are limited. Hence, there is always, and we talk of on a macro scale, on a bigger scale, we are saying there is always a call for people to venture into entrepreneurship, people to start companies. We are experiencing a problem of unemployment and all that. It's because we do not have enough entrepreneurship, right? So we classify it as a limited resource, right? Entrepreneurship. And it is required, it is a factor of production. In order for us to have a good or a service, we would need first the two primary factors, which is your land and your labor. In addition to the basic factors of production, we need the capital and entrepreneurship. Now, money comes into the equation as a means of exchange. Money is a means of exchange. It is not a what? A factor of production. I will repeat. We are saying when we look at entrepreneurship as a factor of production, we are simply referring to the fact that there is a limit to that. And I used an example of the microeconomic view, where we are saying if you look at the economy, there is not enough entrepreneurs to start businesses and create jobs. Hence, we are faced with the problem of unemployment, right? It means there is a limit. These factors of production that we are talking about, they are limited in supply. They are limited in supply. All of them, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, they are limited in supply. Hence, there is always a call for entrepreneurship in an economy. Now, you need to first have land and labor. Then in addition to that, you need machinery, right? Which is used in the production of other goods. You need a tractor to work on the land, right? You need a factory to process the produce that you produced on the land. But overall, you need someone who commits their resources, their intellectual capacity, and their money into production, right? Money is a means of exchange. I hope I've made that clear. Money facilitates exchange. It is not a factor of production. So it means that machinery moves from person to person. It exchanges ownership through money, right? Through money. Now, you will realize that for every factor of production, these factors of production are owned by, who owns the factors of production? Households. An entrepreneur is a person. A person who owns a tractor, right? The labor is a person. Someone owns the land. So factors of production are owned by individuals. And we will realize that when we look at the circular flow of income and spending, which is your unit 3, right? All factors of production are owned by households, and they attract a reward, right? They in return for your land. Let's look at that. in return for your land, what do you get in return? For your land, as a landowner, those who own land, what do you get in return? Anyone?
Money in the form of rent.
Production.
Money in the form of rent. Well done. Thank you. Money in the form of what? Rent. So we are saying the reward for land is rent. And please remember that when we are talking of land, we're including minerals and natural resources, right? So we classify that, and land, you get rent in place of that. What do you get in return for your labor?
You also get your money.
Money in the form of what?
Your wage.
And
Wages
Your wage.
and salaries, right? Wages and salaries. This is the reward for labor. What do you get for your capital?
You get interest.
You get interest, right? You get interest. And for being an entrepreneur, what inspires you to start a business? Because you're going to gain what?
Profits.
Yeah.
Profit.
Profit.
Awesome. Now, so we're saying these factors of production, which are scarce, they are finite resources, they are scarce, they are limited in supply. You cannot use them indefinitely. Classified as factors of production, owned by a household, because a household, when they own land, they get rent in return. If I'm a laborer, I get wages in return. If I get capital, I get interest in return. If I have entrepreneurship, I get profit in return. Right? And when we look at unit 3, right? When you get unit 3, we're simply looking at these financial flows, right? That go into the opposite direction, where if I give out land, right? If I give out land, land goes there. What comes back to me? Rent. Labor, I give out. What comes back? Salaries. Right? So there's always flows that flow in the opposite direction. We'll see that in unit 3. Now, these factors of production are limited in supply against the desires which are endless. We've mentioned them. And in balancing act simply means that we have to decide what to produce and in what quantities, highlighting the importance of strategic economic planning. Now, this brings us to the fundamental economic questions. This slide is going to be loaded with information, right? So we're saying, because of the factors of production which are scarce and the uses thereof are endless, right? We have to prioritize. That is the fundamental economic problem, right? Now we have to answer 3 fundamental economic questions, right? Let me write it down. Fundamental economic questions. Based on point number 3, what would be the fundamental economic questions?
That's the hand.
That we go ahead. So now,
Thank you. Yeah. Before I let you go any further, there's this capital term that you said. When we use capital term in economic, we basically means machinery. I just wanna find out, does that mean it only refers to those items that are able to produce production, or maybe is it also include all the assets that are part and parcel of the production line? Like, for
Yes.
instance, if you are doing your production and then you've got a building structure as well, is it also part of capital as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
So your assets, what you use to produce other goods, that's the definition of capital. Capital, this is everything that you use to produce other goods. Right? Land. A building will fall under land. Building, it's land, because you get rent. You pay rent for a building, right? You pay rent.
Yes.
But what is in the building becomes capital. These are resources that are produced to produce other goods, assets. Right, sorry. Right. Did I answer you, sir?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Awesome. So the economic dilemma refers to the fundamental economic problem, which is scarcity. When we are faced with that scarcity, we have to ask ourselves the three fundamental economic questions, right? Because there has to be a trade-off. There has to be a trade-off. So now, because of these limited resources, which have got so many uses, we have to ask three questions. These are the key questions. Number one, we decide what to produce. Right? We can produce everything, can we? Can we produce everything? Yes? No?
No.
We cannot produce everything. So in the first a very important question in economics, we have to decide what is it that we are going to produce with the resources that we have. Right? After we decide what to produce, what else do we need to check?
Yes, we need to check.
How to produce that, right? How? We first decide what we have, the factors of production that we have, the options, the trade-off, what to produce. We choose, we make a choice. We have to make a choice. What to produce. Now we know what to produce. We need to then check, how do we produce it? How do we produce it? The production techniques. The production techniques. Right? How to produce now is affected by capital, labor, right? The availability of capital, the availability of labor. You are saying, do we use labor-intensive industries or labor-intensive techniques? Or do we use capital-intensive techniques? Who can tell me the difference between the two in the answering of how to produce? Anyone? I mentioned two things: production techniques, labor-intensive and capital-intensive. What do you understand by that?
Doesn't it depend on what we're going to produce? The question, what we're going to produce.
Yes.
So because if you decide to produce something like agriculturally, that would be quite labor intensive, don't you think? Then producing something like an algorithm to do financial analysis, that would be quite the opposite.
All right. Yes, you are spot on, sir. There was another gentleman who wanted to say something.
Yeah, yes, I wanted to say that labor intensive is when you use more to produce something than the machinery. And the other one is when you use less resources of a human being than when you use the machineries.
The machineries. Awesome.
Yes.
Right. Both responses are 100% correct. Now, can someone give us examples? Labor-intensive industries, examples of labor-intensive industries. There's a very common one. And an example of labor-intensive and an example of capital-intensive.
For the labor
The capital intensive, I will say, using robotic when building cars.
Mm-hmm. So motor vehicle industries, assembly. Labor intensive, I see construction. There's people who are sitting at the back. I'll find them. Zandi, are you still here?
In labor normally is for the farms.
Farms, so agriculture.
Agriculture as well.
Yes. Rapelang, are you still there? Voyani,
Mining.
Isha, you are there.
Yeah.
Awesome. There's people that are sitting at the back. And sometimes I wonder if they're still here. Nonkululego, still together? Mzamo, Nobisa, awesome. Is it Dimpo? Healthcare. Now let's look at healthcare. Healthcare, is it capital intensive or labor intensive?
It's labor and capital.
It's labor.
There's both, ne? There is both. So yeah, so you see, when we have decided what to produce, we have to check how to produce. All right, that's 2 questions. There have to be 3. What will be the third question? What will be the third important question?
What we produce.
Who should receive the goods?
Who should receive the goods? Thank you so much for the guys that are waving at the back. You are still there. Happiness. Thank you so much. Who gets what is produced? Yo, my handwriting is ugly. I know people won't join this class because this guy has got an ugly handwriting. I'm gonna work on it. I've been trying for the past
doctor's handwriting.
Right, so we've answered
for the
that.
doctors.
It's better, thank you. Right, so we've answered the 3 fundamental economic questions. It's gonna come either in your assessment or in your formative assessment or in your summative assessment.